So today I am going to be creating clusters using the mini embellishment kit set number 1 from Happiness and Crafting, which is created by Kerr. So I've gone ahead and cut out several of the pieces in this kit. I didn't cut them all out, but I have cut several of them out. I also have a pile of things, leftover scraps, bits and pieces from different kits and different things that I have created or pulled out of books and things that was left over from other projects. And overlook this ink on my fingers. I have been doing some mixed media and it will not come off. So hopefully that doesn't bother you. And so I'm just going to use some of these, but I won't use all of these papers. I just wanted to pull out several pieces out of my scrap bin to be certain that I had enough to work with. I didn't want to have to go searching for bits and pieces once I got started. So I won't be using them all because we're just making some small clusters. So I typically just pull out a strip of paper that I may have cut off the edges of a kit that I've printed out, or any type of scrap like this, just to have a base to start with. And then I will start tearing up some book pages to attach to the base. And so this is just a book page that I tore out sometime or another to use in another project, and it is just from a flower book that I have. But I think today I'll just go ahead and use it as my base. That way I already have some script in the background. And so now I'm just going to start attaching bits and pieces of scraps onto my strip. And I'm using Fabri-Tac because it sticks really well for me, and I like how it works with the clusters. And so this is just a piece of cardstock that was left over from a card that I made. So I'm just going to tear bits of it off and attach to the strip as well. And these are one of my favorite things to make. A lot of times when I'm cleaning up my desk, I get distracted completely with this because there'll be bits and pieces all over my desk left over from journals I've been making, or tags, or different projects. And so I just take those scraps and I start gluing them onto a strip, one of the leftover strips that's in my scrap bin or in my scrap basket, and I just start attaching the bits and pieces. So today I'm actually tearing up paper for this, but some days I just use the bits and pieces that was left over from my projects. And when I do that, it's a great way to use up your scraps and not have so much waste. That way you're not throwing anything away. And so I'm also not throwing anything away because I'm just reusing today things that were from journals that I made that I didn't include in the journal. It was just extra pages or extra bits and pieces. And so I find it a lot of fun to mix all these papers up. So it's not papers from the same kit or the same paper pack. I'm just using papers from different kits and different paper packs, and it's interesting to see what you will get. Now I do like to have a focal point, so that's what today, the embellishment set from Kerr, I'm using as my focal points. So it is fun to have a really good focal point set aside for these. And so with the embellishment kit, I have cut some of those out with the straight edges, and others I have used my little decorative scissors, and I've cut those out to look kind of like stamps. And so I think that that will give a different little look to the strip. And so I just keep adding the papers to the strip, and I'll just make it longer by just attaching another strip to the back of this one. And I guess you could call these snippet rolls. What I eventually do though is I don't leave them in a roll. I do tear these up, and then I just have a little box that I keep them in so that when I'm looking for clusters to add to the edge of a page in a junk journal, or to add to a pocket, or to add to a tab, or to add to anything, I go through all my little scraps like that I've made up, my little clusters I've made up, and typically you can find one that works really good. And so I like to keep these made up so that I have things to add to my journals, and I don't have to make everything for a journal when I'm working on it. And this is a quick mass make way to make up clusters by doing these strips first. You can, and I like to get the variety that you get with this because it's kind of random, since you are just at first just making your base, just adding random pieces of paper. You really don't know how each piece is going to turn out, and I kind of like the randomness of this. Now I do try to keep my strip straight, but that's not really necessary. You can always straighten it out by adding more bits and pieces to it. And sometimes I make these super small, and other times I make them larger. And this one today is going to be more of a medium-sized clusters. They're not really large, but they're not really small either. So I'm just going to continue adding random pieces of paper to this strip and just continue to lengthen the strip until I get it as long as I think is long enough to work with, and then I will start decorating it. And here I'm just using this little piece of brown paper. Is actually leftover packaging from like an Amazon package. And so I like to pull that packaging out and I fold it up and just smooth it out because I know it comes really wrinkled, and I love using it in things like this. So now I'm just going to go through my little scrap bin. This is just scraps of ribbon, lace, even little bits and pieces of fabric. And I've just put it in this little box here, and that way when I want to pull some out to use in projects like this, I can use them, and that way nothing goes to waste. Because this little bit of lace, typically we go to waste because there's not much to do with it, but it really accents the clusters when you add these little bits and pieces like this. So now I'm just going to start using my embellishments to decorate the strip up. And so I add the lace, and then I figure out which embellishment I'm going to use. And I think all of these are absolutely gorgeous little bits and pieces in this kit. And I love projects like this where it's not really something that you have to really put a lot of thought into. It's a very relaxing project that you can just start adding random pieces, and then you can just decorate however you want, and not really, it doesn't require a lot of thought. And so you really don't have to worry about what your cluster before looked like, you know, where I put the lace and the flowers, because I am going to tear these strips up once I get done. But I like decorating the strip all at once and then tearing them up, or you can cut them up or tear them up at the end. You don't, and that way you don't have to figure out what each individual cluster is going to look like as much as you're just working on one large strip. And I love that I'm using up my bits and pieces, leftover bits and pieces for this, so that nothing goes to waste. So if you have not subscribed to my channel, I really would appreciate if you would consider subscribing and liking my videos. And if you subscribe, be sure to turn on the notification bell so you'll be notified each time I upload a new video. I set a goal for myself this year. Each year I set a goal for the number of subscribers that I would like to have. And I was really thrilled last year I met my goal. And so I have a new goal in my head that I'd like to meet. And I really would appreciate if you like my videos and you enjoy them. I'd appreciate you subscribing, as well as if you really like my videos and like what I'm creating, it would also be helpful if you share my videos with your friends and let others know about my channel. So now I'm just going to leave you just a few minutes with some music so you can watch how I decorate each one of the clusters, because each one I do a little different. Some of them I add fabric, some of them I add lace, some of them I add lace and fabric, and I thought you might want to see how I put them together. And then I'll come back with you at the end when I finish this strip, and we will take a look at how each one turned out. So now that I have the strip completed, I'm going to add some splashes to it. So I'm going to start out first with some very dark brown, and it's called Burnt Umber. And so I'm just taking and adding a little water to it, which my water bottle is running too low, and I don't want to get up and add more water. So I'm just going to pour a little bit into the paint because I just want to loosen it up some so that it makes good splashes. So I'm just going to use an old brush to add the splashes to these. So I'm just testing it on my scrap paper first to make sure that the splashes look how I want them to look. And I think it's doing very well. So now I'm just going to add splashes to this strip. And it's easier to do all of this at one time with everything on the strip so that you're not doing each individual one. I think it's quicker this way. I always like to test off a little bit because I don't want big globs landing on my project. I always want to make sure that there's just smaller. And I love how the brown looks with these papers. I also don't want to cover up my flowers or the faces of the little fairy or anything like that with the brown. So if I get it on there, I just stop and I'll just wipe it off. It's no big deal. So now I'm just going to come back with some of a lighter paint, and I'm not sure the name of this one. It's more of a cream beige color, and I'm just going to add a little bit more water. I didn't want white splashes on this, but I did want another color of splashes, so that's why I'm going with the cream ivory color. And so I'm just lightly going back through and adding some of those splashes in. And so now we are ready to start tearing our strip up and making up our clusters. So here you could just roll it up and keep it like this, but like I said, I don't have anywhere to store something like this, so I prefer to tear them up into clusters and then have them ready to go when I'm working on the project. So I think these would look really good with a word. So I use my Tim Holtz Small Talk, which has a lot of phrases and sayings, and so I'm just going to add these to the clusters. I really like having the inspirational sayings on clusters. And so when I'm tearing these off, I do try to decide, you know, how long I want the cluster. So I did leave space in between each one where they're decorated up. I left space so that you could just tear it and you could have longer clusters. But if you do not want that much space, you don't have to leave it. Or if you realize at the end you've left too much space, you can always just trim the edge off. So some of the words in this book or phrases have a white background, so I just go back and ink those every time I use them because typically I don't need a white background. So this one is a longer cluster, which would look great on a pocket or somewhere in your journal, like on a belly band that goes across the page, rather than the ones that go up and down. So I am going through and inking some of these. Once I tear them off, I just ink the edges. So I kind of just use my fingers to decide where I want to tear them and how wide I want them. It's really nothing technical. It's just kind of eyeballing it and figuring out what I want to do with each one, how big I want each one to be. And also, if I decide I want them smaller, the stamps, I put the stamps in between because that way I can also just use those as a cluster as well. So for example, with this one, I can cut right here and then I can also cut past the stamp and I'll be able to have another little cluster where that stamp is by itself. So here are all the clusters finished up and ready to go, and I hope that you have enjoyed seeing how I made these. And if you decide to make some, be sure to tag me on Instagram or on Facebook. I would love to see what you create. Well, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and bye.